Today, I'm lucky enough to be behind the camera rather than in front. Catherine is here to talk a little bit about this work by Liszt. What's it called?
It is called Après une lecture du Dante, and he undertitles it Fantasia Quasi Sonata.
Could you tell us a little bit about the structure of this work?
Yes, if we refer to what we did last week about the sonata form, this is, although it is called Fantasia Quasi Sonata, for me it's very much following the story of the Dante Divine Comedy. And it is clearly divided in three passages: Hell, Purgatory, and Paradise.
So none of this exposition, development, recapitulation.
No, I think when first Liszt wrote that piece, maybe because there's a first version, maybe he had a more sonata-like form. But here we clearly see that when he revised it later during his life, he completely exploded the sonata form and favorizing actually the program music and really following the text of the Divine Comedy.
So program music, how does he actually describe the first part, which is Hell?
He really follows the story, the text of Dante, and he makes us cross the Styx, the river of the dead, and by using a very interesting interval, it's called the Triton, and giving it a very diabolical feeling. And so it's an interval he used in other pieces like Mephisto Waltz, where it's everywhere, and so it starts like this. It's very much like the Last Judgment trumpets. So after that, we understand that we are really going for something that is not going to be light or easy.
So Liszt has announced the descent into hell. And then what happens?
Well, he describes exactly, again, following the text of the Divine Comedy, he describes the damnation of those souls that are being tortured and eaten alive, and all the kind of horrible supplice that they are going through in hell. And so for that he uses a very simple thing. He just uses the chromatism and then repeats it, so it creates really agitation and torment.
So again, he's using this repeated note technique, the same one that he used at the beginning.
Exactly, absolutely, but it is in a completely different setting.
And how does he describe the other parts of hell?
So we have a lot of fire going on, like for example here. So he uses this kind of what we called
broken octaves.
Yes, and so to make it sound like a lot of agitation and the fire, and really he also make the people hear them screaming, basically, for example here. And then we come back to the Annunciation. Fire, and so it's really this very much sufferance and of the damnated people.
The damned souls.
And then eventually, you know, with all this kind of fight, of really being condemned and having no issue of redemption, suddenly we have a theme that we're going to find in the Purgatory, that is the theme of the human, of the man, that is actually, you know, he takes out all of those souls and he say, yes, but there is a human theme. And actually Liszt very much related to that kind of evil versus good, with him stuck in the middle. And we can see through his life, because he really started his life as a rock star and, like, you know, a Beatle or something, and he ended up being a priest. So I mean, it's a kind of amazing change in life. And so that's the theme of something more human. That later on in the Purgatory in a very completely different way, like this. So as you see, the theme is the same, but the effect and the setting, because before we had those huge octaves, and here we have this very quiet accompaniment, so it is completely different meaning.
One of the things that fascinates me about this kind of music is the technique, actually, that Liszt used, so different from Beethoven that we saw last week. This last passage that you played with these flying octaves, can you show us a little bit?
Well, it's actually quite simple, because it's just the theme. And what does Liszt to give it this kind of torment and turmoil? He uses the octave as he writes precipitato, meaning that they have to be. So it's just simple octaves. Octave means an interval of
8 notes.
8 notes, and it's really, you know, in the pianist technique to be able to do this.
You have to notice these hands, because I can reach an octave, but I can't reach much more. Yeah. Catherine can reach an octave plus a few notes.
But Liszt had even bigger hands, and of course some pianists have bigger hands, yes.
So we continue with the human voice asking for redemption.
We actually arrive after a huge fight. We arrive to, again,
like the beginning, the tritone.
Exactly. So change in setting. Maybe he is going on his way, and he's arriving actually in the Purgatory. And so, as you see, he uses again the repeated note, but in a completely different, with a completely different meaning. Completely different. But you see, it's the same.
Always the repeated note pattern.
And then he goes on and goes on with this transition until arriving to what I said, the man. That meaning that maybe in the Purgatory there is a hope for redemption, so there is still a different level. Also, we have to think that in the Divine Comedy, when he arrives to the Purgatory, Dante is actually led by Beatrice, who was his ideal woman, the love of his life. So maybe also there is something related to that figure of love.
Is it partially autobiographical?
Actually, I'm not sure, but I think for Liszt, he felt very much related to that, because he, at the time he composed the first version of that, he was living in sin with Marie Dagout. They had to escape, the society of Paris, because they were lovers and they had children. So they fled to Italy, and I think later on during his life, when he reviewed that score, he at the time was living, I think, in Germany, and he was taking the order, the priesthood. So again, I think it's very much autobiographical for him. He was very much feeling concerned.
And how do we arrive then to paradise?
So, again, after the seduction of maybe being able to escape the purgatory and go to paradise, there is, as you see, there is a huge section where the devil is coming back and trying, after temptation, is actually fighting against where he thought he was going to make it, but the devil comes. So you recognize that now.
Again, the tritone.
And then trouble again. It goes and goes on. But as you see, he really makes us understand that purgatory is just, we never know which way it's going to go. And so it's very interesting that there is this huge section with huge octaves again. It's like this turmoil again and this fight between evil and good, and then eventually here we find again this theme of the man. Right? And it's still very agitated because underneath there is still, the turmoil going on. Okay, and so at that point, the poor man has no hope, and he said, "At least, okay, so just okay, I'm going to accept my fate, and I will go to hell, and I'm going to be tortured forever and ever." And there is this moment where he actually very much resigned to that, where we have this kind of again with double notes.
Desperation.
Etc., etc. So he's really saying, okay, I agree.
I give in.
Give in. And that's the end, basically. But here we go again. We have our kind of mysterious key, and this time he just makes it longer because out of this desperation and mystery comes heaven. And it's the same theme of the man, but completely transformed in a divine way. So it goes like this. And then in heaven, so heaven, possibility of redemption, being forgiven for your sins. There is a big portion here of complete joy again with huge octaves, huge arpeggios, huge chords, and the crazy passages towards the end. A very, very bright finale with a lot of, again, double notes and chords. So it's very fascinating for us pianists to play Liszt, because first, he was an amazing pianist. So everything he wrote, when you have the hand and the means to do it, is just exhilarating to play. And we love playing Liszt. The other face of the coin is that sometimes Liszt has been taxed of easy music or easy effects, which might be true, but I think if you go a bit further into his soul, you can find this kind of very interesting depth that I think is really worth exploring. And so it is, I think, a composer that needs to be played otherwise than just for his fantastic effects and amazing virtuosity.